On today's show, Ernie Svenson, better known as Ernie the Attorney, and a longtime legal technology leader helping lawyers use tech to improve the way they practice. We'll be talking about how law firms can use AI to capture institutional knowledge using curated chatbots, and why replacing outdated SOPs with prompt-driven playbooks create more efficient workflows for training, delegation, intake, and day-to-day firm operations.
Lawyers need to calm down and focus on how to use this sensibly, like all technology, and then figure out how to get the most out of it, because it can make your life a lot better. If you're not using it because you have this amorphous fear that something bad could happen, well, lots of lawyers are passing you up. You're in the slow lane.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jason, and joining me today, somebody I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while now, Ernie Svenson, better known to many as Ernie the Attorney. What's up, Ernie? Great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. I'm excited to talk to you about all the stuff that I know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And shocker for everybody, we're going to be talking some AI today. But Ernie, I've been reading through a lot of your newsletters that come out every week. I love reading them. And there's a theme that's sort of been coming up over and over, and that's the idea that most law firms, they have knowledge, they have some systems, there's a lot of expertise that they have within the firm to operate pretty efficiently. But the problem is that the knowledge is trapped, right? It's buried in email threads, PDFs, SOPs that maybe nobody even reads anymore, shared drives, etc. And worst of all, a lot of times it's just in people's heads, right? And It's just not anywhere to be found. So at the same time, we now have these AI tools that are becoming more capable and accessible than ever before. And the firms that are getting the biggest benefits are not necessarily the ones that are using the most AI or different AI tools, but they're using AI to capture knowledge, to improve their systems, train staff, and basically to eliminate these operational bottlenecks. So today, I want to talk to you about what this actually looks like inside a law firm. We're going to get into AI-powered knowledge systems, internal firm chatbots. That's a mouthful. And then one that I'm excited about, how to turn an SOP into a prompt library. But before we dive headlong into all that, I want to introduce you to everybody for people that may not already know you, which is a good size people that do. But Ernie, he spent nearly 2 decades as a commercial litigator in a large law firm before eventually launching his own practice. But for the past 20 years, Ernie's been one of the leading voices helping lawyers use technology to build more efficient, profitable, and frankly, more enjoyable practices. Lots of recognition during that time. ABA Legal Rebel, Fast Case 50s, author of multiple books on legal technology. But today, Ernie runs the Inner Circle. It's his community where solo and small firm lawyers collaborate on technology, AI, automation, systems outsourcing, all things practice management. But what I love about it is that it focuses almost like an R&D department for small firms, allowing lawyers to test different things, share what's working for them, and just help everybody else avoid wasting time chasing every new technology, trend, or shiny object that comes along that we often do. And so, Ernie, the thing I love about you, though, and I've known you now a long time, it's just that you've been on the cutting edge of legal tech for decades now. And you've seen multiple waves of technology and how it transformed the legal profession over this time, from going paperless to cloud computing, cloud software, to automation, and of course now there's AI. And so the first thing I want to get into is one of these ideas that you've written about, and we mentioned at the top there, is that most law firms, it's not the AI that's the problem, it's the collective knowledge, the institutional knowledge within the firm. And since they already know how to do things, and all this stuff, like we said, it's in emails, documents, SOPs, or in somebody's head. And the thing is as a firm grows, that creates a bunch of friction you would expect, right? Team members interrupting each other with questions, new hires, takes them forever to get up to speed. Partners often are bottlenecks because they're the only ones that know how to do a certain thing. And so, Ernie, when you look at solo and small firms today, like how big of a problem is this hidden knowledge problem, if you will, and how have you seen that manifest itself?
Yeah, well, I think it's not even just a problem with solo and small firms. It's anywhere people are collaborating and doing knowledge work together, you have the potential for them not to be able to share their knowledge efficiently. I think the biggest disruptor was, I mean, paperless is kind of what made it possible. But now we all work remotely, or for the most part. There's a lot of remote work, even in big firms. COVID was an accelerant for that, but that was kind of already happening anyway. And we all know that story, right? But when you have people that are working together, but they're not in the same location and they don't meet every day and talk about things, or the boss can bellow down the hall and the secretary or paralegal comes running, that way of operating, I think, hid a lot of the lack of knowledge sharing, right? Because you can rapidly make up for it by just calling somebody in. But when you can't do that because everybody's distributed, you really have to think about how to share this information asynchronously as well as remotely. Then you start to see the problems, like the problems become manifest quickly. So that's where it started, and it still exists because
it seems like this is a problem, even if everybody literally worked in the same office. And this problem still exists, right? Because this guy knows how to do that, and somebody else knows how to do another thing.
But it's easier to pretend it's not as bad, or it's easier. Like I said, if your lawyers are notorious and have always been for doing things at the last minute, so if you can cover your ass by pulling somebody at the last minute, no harm, no foul. But there is a harm and there is a foul when you can't do that. And so I think that's exposing the problem. And the other thing is, once you can start automating things, you can only automate that which has been systematically worked out, right? You have to say, okay, if this happens and we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. So that systems thinking, the rigorousness of that gets exposed also when you're automating. And a lot of lawyers like to think they're very rigorous thinkers. But in reality, if you tell them, okay, well, if you're such a rigorous thinker, show me the flowchart of the decision tree and everything else. Oh, yeah. And then also these vagaries come out, and they think that they're saying something perfectly clear and methodical, but in reality, it's not. So what lawyers, and not all of them, obviously, but what many lawyers think is true because it's true in their head, but reality exposes that it's not really true out there, that's the problem. And technology has just made that increasingly obvious that people are not as rigorous in their thinking as many of them like to believe they are.
Yeah, and it's funny because we were talking about this before the show for a minute, but the idea that AI and technology is going to solve all these problems, but the reality is that automation, technology, AI, these are just accelerants. So if you have jacked up systems or none at all or other not rigid processes for doing things, all that AI and tech does is it just makes all those problems worse. I've heard this talked about in other places too, is solve those things and then use AI to scale all of those things. And so, but let me ask you this, like before we get into some of the more detailed things that we want to talk about, but like when a firm does this well or solves this well, what does that look like for them all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, it looks like nirvana compared to the opposite, right? I mean, it's, I don't know, I guess I've told this story many times in my podcast and other places. Like, I was very fortunate when I got out of law school. I spent 2 years clerking for this federal judge, and he was a federal trial judge, and he was very systematic. Like, he had a book called The Bible, and that was a book that was designed to tell you how to do everything. I mean, and the detail in it was shockingly detailed, to the point, for example, that there was a section in there about which of the two clerks would water the plants and when. Now, watering plants is not an incredibly important judicial function, but we had plants and they would die if somebody didn't water them, and he wasn't going to water them. And that was the whole premise, was like, I'm not doing all this stuff. We're paying you. You guys do this. So there was nothing that was part of my job that wasn't in the Bible. And if something came up, because inevitably work develops in some way and there's something that should have been in the Bible, or maybe it should be in the Bible, but it wasn't in there before, he'd say, well, go check the Bible. I said, well, Judge, it's not in there. He goes, well, then put it in there. So he didn't even update it. So what it looks like, if it's done right, is person at the top is doing very little other than orchestrating, and everybody below knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when, and it gets done, and occasionally things fall between the cracks, and you address that. But for the most part, things work really well without him telling you what to do. Like the first day I showed up at work, he didn't give me like a, hey, welcome, here's what you're going to do. It was like, there's a book on your desk called the Bible. Read it. You're responsible for everything in it. And I thought everybody operated that way. So when I went into the practice of law, I was expecting to see something like that, although I kind of had a sense that that probably wasn't the case based on a lot of the lawyers who appeared in front of him. But I was just like thinking, this is what sophisticated firms do and good lawyers do. And the shocking realization was, no, most of them don't actually do that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Nirvana as you're describing that, and I think whether you're a law firm leader, owner, or just an entrepreneur, business owner, what you described is, there's a book and it describes how everything needs to happen. You don't need to touch it. They update it and so forth. Yeah, I love that. So anyway, your answer almost as if like you knew what my next question was going to be, but I do want to talk about one of the solutions to getting to that point that you've been talking about, and that's the idea of using AI to make the firm's knowledge accessible to everyone. And so you've written about, and I think you've even created your own within your program, these curated chatbots, these systems, what is it, RAG or RAG systems, using tools like Notebook LM to create what's essentially an internal AI-powered help desk or a version of the Bible. So for someone hearing all these terms for the first time, what exactly is a cured chatbot, and why is this really such a big opportunity for law firms that don't, or even the ones that do have the Bible?
Yeah. Well, the thing about creating, so what people need is an SOP, like a standard operating procedure. There's a famous book, Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, who is a physician. He talked about how a lot of the malpractice or mistakes that happen in medicine was because somebody missed something on the checklist. Pilots famously have checklists for everything. I took flying lessons at one point, and it was shocking how like they'd say, go check the ailerons, go do all this stuff. And you think, really, do I need to do this every time? And the answer is yes. If you want to be methodical, you need to do certain things the same way every time, right? So the thing about creating SOPs is it's boring, it's drudgery, it's annoying. Nobody likes doing it. And then maintaining it, same thing. But if you have them and then you expect people to use them and they do, that nirvana that we talked about happens earlier. How AI can help that unfold better is that it makes it less annoying. Like if you go to AI, a chatbot, and say, okay, I need to create an SOP for intake. I'm an estate planning lawyer. And you just have a brain dump of all the things you think of. They don't have to be organized. This is the beauty of AI. You can take rambling, unstructured, off the top of your head mumbo jumbo, which is an equivalent of spaghetti on the wall, and it'll organize it and put it into some kind of structure. That's what it's really good at. That's its highest and best use, most reliable use. So you can use it to create the SOPs. You can use it to modify the SOPs. And at some point, if you've got this all written out, you can give it to the chatbot and say, okay, your job is when we do this to walk us through it so that it's done properly. A chatbot walking you through a set of instructions that it's developed with you is going to be more fluid and dynamic and adaptable than a rigid recipe. So that's the first big benefit, because it can spot things or think of new things on the fly, and that's very desirable. So it makes it more enjoyable, makes it work better, and you can create the SOPs faster.
And you can dialogue with it, right? Whereas
correct.
Obviously a book or a document, it says what it says. You can't ask it questions, or at least you couldn't. Yeah. Now it's like, okay, I've read this. I don't fully understand. What does that mean? Or what is this acronym? Or what is it? Like, I mean, that's the part I love just about using AI and learning anything in general. I'm not just scrolling through a list of links on Google, trying to find the article that roughly addresses what I want. But I can literally just keep asking follow-up questions and get deeper and deeper. So to this extent, now when you say a chatbot, is that what Notebook LM is, right? There's a Google product. Is that essentially the tool you recommend in creating this thing? Or help us consolidate this bigger idea into practicality?
So AI, there's two kinds of AI. There's deterministic AI and there's generative AI. What everybody's talking about these days is generative AI, the chatbots, the things that can generate thoughts and have a dialogue and so forth. We'll forget about deterministic, but deterministic is very mechanical and more rigid, and it's going to produce the same result every time. So it's basically like automation. But this generative AI with a chatbot, that's Gemini, which is Notebook LM, Google's tool. There's Chat GPT, there's Claude. Perplexity has its own kind of minor one, but then it also calls upon the other major ones. So it doesn't really matter for our purposes as we're talking now to identify one over the other. It's just you're having a conversation and working things out, and that's beneficial. There is one other thing too to mention, which is when these things first arrived, they had a cutoff date and they couldn't search the internet. Now, even though they have a cutoff date for their training, they can go find the answer on the internet. And this also makes them incredibly valuable, because if you're asking it a question about something and it can go find the answer on the internet, that's really good. Like, I mean, I used to use Google to answer all kinds of problems about troubleshooting technology, and that was very cumbersome to pull those answers out, because first you had to get the best answer somewhere, then you had to read through the ads. It's the whole thing. Now you just go, hey, my computer won't do this. Tell me what to do, and it'll tell you. And then if you realize like you're missing something, you just tell, well, I need to give you this additional piece of information. So it's the power of being able to look things up on the internet and converse with you as you think of more things to tell it or additional things that need to be told. This is just huge. That if it did nothing else than that, this is amazing. But there's more that it can do. But that alone is the table stakes. And everybody should be using it as much as possible for everything. Obviously, it can make mistakes. Obviously, it's not perfect, but neither are humans, by the way. So just keep your thinking cap on your head, be sensibly skeptical, and you're fine.
And so, yeah, it's funny. I saw an email that you'd put out this morning just talking about lawyers, the headlines of lawyers getting in trouble for this or that, but it's not the reality. And it's no different than it was 30 years ago, as if you were taking citations or some sort of input from an associate or an admin and didn't bother to double check it yourself. Like, other people can get things wrong too. And at the end of the day, you're an attorney, you're responsible for what you're submitting to whoever, clients, courts, and so forth. So if you haven't reviewed it and confirmed the facts, that's on you. But in terms of these curated chatbots and building these AI knowledge systems, is the idea that this is a repository, just dump everything you have, whether it's around a particular topic, and I don't know exactly how you can structure these, but you put it all in there, and now it's in your AI tool, and you can query it, and it's going to look in these documents and maybe videos, all the different sources that you give it. I know I do something sort of like that within ChatGPT. You create a project, you add all the sources in there, and then you can create different threads around different things. But is this roughly what we're talking about in building this firm knowledge system?
Yeah, so it can go get information on the web. We know that. It's got its training. That's great. But yes, you can give it information and say, I want you to help me examine this, consider it, look at these different things. So you can focus it in on a repository. And the acronym for that is RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, which sounds completely vague and that doesn't make any sense. But it is the term, right? So you focus it on something. So Google's Notebook LM is like the best example of this, because you can't do anything with it that isn't a RAG. It's all a RAG. Like, you put the stuff in, it doesn't go look anywhere else. It focuses only on what you give it. That doesn't eliminate that it would hallucinate, but it almost completely does. But what it still can do is maybe misunderstand or not accurately represent something. So you have to check its work.
Can you do that? Can you ask it to cite where it's giving you an answer? Like,
oh no, it does.
So that I can go in that document.
Oh no, it does. That's what. Yeah, that's what it does. You put all the stuff in there, and then when it comes up with an answer, all those answers are cited. So you can hover over the source, click on it, it'll pull up the source. So you can instantly verify what is being said, and see for yourself if it was accurately stated or represented. So Google's Notebook LM is, I think, for lawyers, definitely a tool that they should all investigate it. And it's like, I think, the least expensive of all of them. Most of them are like $20 a month. You definitely don't want to be using the free ones. And I think Google, to use Notebook LM, is like $14 a month maybe. So it's a little less than the rest of them. But I definitely recommend that lawyers look at Google Notebook LM and understand that one, because it is nothing more than a RAG. You can make the other ones focus in on RAGs, but you're never quite sure unless you're good at this, what it's looking at or not. So Notebook LM is super powerful. And Google's AI engine, which is Gemini, has long been held to be the best in terms of general capacity and capability. So it doesn't mean it doesn't hallucinate. It doesn't mean the other ones aren't as good. It's just Google knows how to do AI, and of course they do. So check out Notebook LM for sure.
And so I think probably you and I both know the question as you say this, you're dumping all sorts of information, and what's popping up in lawyers listening is confidentiality, their concerns around that. Is that data protected? Is it training the AI? Like, is it like their private data going to show up in somebody else's answer somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, the explanation I always give is this, and this is a good way to conceptualize it. If you think of what these things have been trained on, they've been like the amount of data, let's just pretend it's like the Pacific Ocean, okay? Like that's how much data it is, right? And then the additional information that they could get from the web is more data, right? So all of that data, and then you take your data, what's your data in comparison to that? It's like a thimbleful or an eyedropper drop. That's what it is. So if you think of how likely would that be, like message in a bottle in the ocean to pop up on an island where somebody discovers it, it's like it's not going to happen. That's not how the problem is going to occur. The way the problem could occur is if something very specific, like that's of high value, like some topic that people are interested in, and you have something very specific, that very specific piece of information could surface as part of a response, and maybe somebody could figure out, well, you're the only person who had it. But that's a lot of ifs, right? We're talking like Carl Sagan astronomy, like level of unlikelihood. So that's not really the risk. The risk, and here's where I want to remind lawyers, like while you're busy looking off in this direction where it's highly unlikely to happen, you're taking your eyes off the most obvious place where it's going to happen, which is you or the people around you misusing it by making their passwords too easy to guess and their data is stolen and the usual stuff that happened with the cloud. And even for that, lawyers have not been even as reprimanded as far as I know. Like, it's not good. You might have to disclose it that you were an idiot and let your data out, but nobody's been even reprimanded. So lawyers need to like calm down and focus on how to use this sensibly, like all technology, and then figure out how to get the most out of it, because it can make your life a lot better. And if you're not using it because you have this amorphous fear that something bad could happen, well, lots of lawyers are passing you up. You're in the slow lane. So put your foot on the gas and learn how to drive carefully, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that idea. Yeah, just you got to use it, but just be careful about it. So just quickly, how is this idea of a curated chatbot different than just simply using ChatGPT? Is it because it's a RAG system, you're putting your own information in there, so it's using both the wider training knowledge base as well as your stuff?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's operating inside of a very tight boundary that you've given it, if you're using Notebook LM or focusing on a RAG, as opposed to just asking it questions. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Okay, cool. All right, so we got that. Now, let's talk about what are some of the practical examples you recommend and how a law firm might use this, whether it's a new hire onboarding, you mentioned just creating an intake process, SOP, FAQs, workflows, just whatever general policies around the firm. What are some of the best use cases that you like to talk to people about?
Well, these days, and we've gone from, in my inner circle, like from a year and a half ago, we were talking about ChatGPT mostly because that was the dominant one. And yes, Perplexity and Notebook LM. And Claude, we kind of like, yeah, that's like ChatGPT, but if you prefer Claude, use Claude. And Claude was always slightly better at writing. But more recently, Claude has gone to the fore because of Claude Code, Claude Cowork, these various tools. And it's widely acknowledged, or there's a lot of consensus around the idea that Claude is better for most things than ChatGPT. Now, there's some, I'm not saying for everything, but for the purposes of lawyers, Claude is better. Like there's a famous guy named Zach Fowler, I think is his name, who talked about the Claude native firm, and people went crazy about this, and it was a LinkedIn post, and he was basically saying, I use Claude to like run my whole firm. He's a solo. Now, that's somewhat exaggerated, but he's using it a lot. So Claude is the first thing I would say lawyers need to zero in on. What can Claude do? Well, we probably don't have enough time to cover it all, but the number one thing that lawyers should focus in on with Claude is something called skills. What are skills? Skills are, let's say you're doing something and you're having a chat back and forth about onboarding or answering discovery, something that's a routine task, a normal task, and you're talking through how you want it to do what you want it to do. If at the end of this chat you say, hey, listen, Claude, I think this maybe is a good skill, you tell me, and I tell people this all the time, just treat it like you don't really know that much and let it guide you, because it's really good about not steering you in a bad way. Again, keep your thinking cap on and all that good stuff. But if you just say, hey, do I need a skill for this? You go, yeah, let's build the skill together. And it will then ask you questions like, well, do you want it to be like this? It'll ask you things you probably should have thought of to tell it, but you didn't. And it'll draw all that out. It'll get a really organized sense of what this kind of task that you're giving it and want it to create a skill for. And so basically a skill is like an SOP. Again, we're back to the SOPs. But it's a particular kind of SOP that's really neat. Because once the skill is built, Claude will say, okay, great. Now go ahead and hit save, and you'll save it. And now it's stored up in the servers in Claude. And when you ask it to do that kind of task again, you won't have to say, hey, go get that skill. It'll know from the context of what you're asking it to do. Oh, it'll always be looking. Like, do I have a skill for this? Oh, look, I've got a skill for this. And you can see it saying, oh, accessing skill, thinking, looking at this, looking at that. So the skill now becomes the thing that moves the ball forward automatically and in a better way. And as over time you realize, like, well, maybe that skill didn't work exactly like I wanted to, you tell, hey, Claude, listen, like, let's update that skill. Here's some things to think of. It'll interview you. You'll go, okay, fine, save the new skill. So it's even easier to create these SOPs if they're in the form of a skill. But then it gets even better, because if you're using the Teams version of Claude, where multiple people can all be working off the same account, where they give you some additional protections, that skill can become an organizational skill and is now available to everyone on the team. And that is what leads you into the place where now you're using this tool in a much more sophisticated, beneficial way.
And so what would be just a couple of ideas for anyone listening? What are some good skills, like what good first project or skill? What are some good uses for this so people can conceptualize what you're describing?
Yeah, and this is the question that comes up all the time in the inner circles. I'm well prepared to answer this question. Well, first of all, conceptually, it's anything you're doing repeatedly. Well, what is that? Writing, obviously. You're always writing. And so I tell people, you should build a skill that can write like you. Now, you can get really granular with this and tell it, okay, I want a skill for when I write emails, and I want a skill for when I write a brief. It's not a good idea to try to specialize with the skill at first, because it's your first skill. So it's better if it's general. It's better if you maximize its use in a general way. And over time, you may say, it's fine the way it is. I can use it for writing anything, because there's a general way that you write. That's certainly true for me. Like, there's a general way that I write most things. In my case, over time, I realized, but when I write a Substack post, I really want it to be considering this. So I have a separate skill for the Substack post writing. And then same with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is it's mostly the formatting, but there's an approach to it. So I trained it on LinkedIn. So when I write something, I'll say, this is a post for the inner circle. All right, let's turn it into a Substack post. It knows what to do. I'll say, okay, turn that into a LinkedIn post. It knows what to do. And none of them are so good that I look at them and go, that's exactly how I would have written it. I'm not changing a damn thing. But it didn't take me long to get that first part. I'm just reacting to things and changing things based on a reaction. That's not heavy work. That's not hard to do. So it makes it really easy and enjoyable to write these different things. So the writing skill is number one. I'd say an email parsing skill, like one that if you connect it, okay, this is another concept. If you take these tools and say, I'm going to connect you to my email, whether it's Outlook or Gmail or whatever, and say, I want you to look at my email today and tell me what I've got that's important. It'll look at it, it'll break it down for you. And you might say, as I did before I created this skill, well, why don't I just go look at my email? Well, the answer is because there's a lot of noise in there, and you have to cognitively sift through the noise. There's something nice about having it handed to you on a platter by a very helpful AI tool, and then
it's almost like you have an assistant It's like
It
reading
is
an
like,
email
exactly.
and surfacing
Yes.
the most important things. This is what you
Yes.
need to focus on. We can potentially handle the others. I even was saying early on, I was just calling it an assistant intelligence. I was just treating it like a personal assistant and trying to get a lot of low value stuff or time consuming things that it could do reasonably well to do it. How difficult in terms of setting up these skills in Claude or something similar? And is it similar, is like a custom GPT somewhat similar to a skill in Claude versus?
It is. The difference between a custom GPT and a skill is the custom GPTs don't fire automatically.
Right.
That's the biggest one. But otherwise, it's the same concept. Like it's an instruction set you're giving it that it stores. And what's interesting is you can, and I remember early on when skills came out, people would say, here's how you build a skill. And I'd look at that and I think, man, that seems like a lot of work. I'm not doing that. And then I learned, well, you don't have to. You tell it what you want. It builds the skill. It stores the skill. And you can look at what it stored and say, okay, it captured it, and you can examine it. When you examine it, you'll see there's a structure to it. And it's basically just like the custom GPTs, which you also can create by asking it questions. Like it stores the instruction set automatically there. You can edit it, but for the most part, it does all the heavy lifting. So yeah, pretty much the same thing.
And does it work? Because I've thought to myself when I've created loads of custom GPTs with very detailed instructions within them. And I'm like, if this custom GPT was a human, I would have fired them 25 times over because they're constantly screwing this shit up and it drives me crazy. I'm like, the instructions are there. I spent the time creating them. Why are you not following it? I said 3 bullet points, not 10 or whatever. So I haven't used skills in Claude, but this sounds encouraging.
I think skills in Claude are better, at least than what I remember custom GPTs to be, because I haven't created one or used one in a long time. But they all can fail to follow an instruction, and you just reprimand it. But I think they're all getting better at that because the developers know that they have to make that better. So they're all getting better, but they're not perfect.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so I want to get into the next thing that I'm really interested to talk to you about. And this is an idea you've written about. And like I said, it caught my attention. I think it's a really cool concept. We've talked about the importance of SOPs. Every business owner knows how important they are. But you have an idea of replacing sort of the traditional SOP or Bible that the judge you worked for had with this idea of prompt libraries, right? So I think most firms have some version, right? You said operations manual or document. But the thing is, these things get outdated or nobody's even reading them or nobody owns them to keep updating. And maybe sometimes they're just not even capturing how work actually gets done anymore. And so that what you're saying is AI can fundamentally change how firms document, execute these processes. And so what do you mean exactly when you say prompt libraries could become the new SOPs or operations manuals?
Well, first of all, let me say I have to update that statement because I think the new SOPs are skills, and prompt libraries are good, but they're cumbersome, and you have to store them, you have to manage them like a librarian, and they're not as easily shareable, and they don't execute automatically like skills do. So my mantra these days is skills are the way, the truth, and the light. And when you combine skills with agentic AI, where it starts doing things on its own and works with other agents, you got to have something more like skills to make that happen. So a prompt library is a good thing to think of as a repository of your best prompts for different things. But where that should live, to me now, is in skills.
And essentially a skill is just one big set of instructions, just a big long prompt of a repeatable task. Then, as you mentioned, it can be available either just to you or it can be available firm-wide or company-wide. So either way, conceptually, I think it's the same thing. Tactically, it's a little bit different from a prompt to a skill, maybe even just semantics. But how do you go from, all right, I've got all these SOPs documented wherever they are. How do we move that and convert that into prompts and skills and these automated ways of doing that? Is it just dumping them all into the... Okay.
No. Dumping bad. It's like, it reminds me of that Saturday Night Live thing. Fire bad. Was it? No. Anyway, the Tarzan thing, Joe Piscopo, was it? Fire bad. It was Tarzan guy. Anyway, the dumping things is bad. And this is This is a phenomenon that happens constantly, and it comes from the basic human nature of like, I just want to get this over with as quickly as possible. I'm going to dump all that stuff in there and let that tool figure it out. In theory, it can, and it can figure a lot of things out, but it's a bad way to operate generally because of the principle of garbage in, garbage out. And it's not going to throw as much garbage out as it would if in the previous days where it was just automation mechanistic, but it's just not a good way to operate. So, but it's a persistent thing. And I see this with the lawyers I work with all the time. I'm like, look, you're trying to do too much too fast. And I know because I do it myself. But now I catch myself, probably more so because I'm telling people not to do it. So I hear myself telling other people not to do it. Now you realize, like, oh, you're about to go down this trail. Don't do that. So and this is basic engineering. Like if any engineers are out there, software developers, and they go, let's make this so that it works for 100,000 people. They don't go, oh, great, let's just release it now and have 100,000 people use it. They go, let's test it with one person, now with 3. Oh, we found some bugs, let's fix them. Oh, let's try it with 10. Oh, so a few more bugs, let's fix that. You iterate very slowly and methodically. That's how engineers operate. And here again, I think lawyers think that they're very methodical like engineers, but sorry, folks, you're not. To watch true engineers, they don't operate that way. And I know Facebook's mantra was move fast and break things, but they're moving fast in a methodical way. And when they say break things, they mean don't be afraid to let things fail so you can see what failed and fix it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being very careful. And if you do that, a couple of things happen. One, you don't stress yourself out. 2, you get to adjust those things with more time and thoughtfulness. And so the results are always better all the way across the board, right? The problems come from trying to do too much too fast. So don't do that.
Yeah. And one of the things I think you've said that I liked is the idea that focus on outcomes rather than the specific processes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the outcomes tell you if it's working or not. I mean, you should be process oriented, but the nice thing about AI is if you don't like the result it gives you, tell it to do something different. There's somebody I recommend that people follow named Allie Miller. She's on LinkedIn. She's a guru of AI. Definitely follow her. She's got a lot of practical tips. But the one that she issues forth repeatedly is straight from the Spice Girls. That song, Tell It What You Want, Tell Me What You Want, What You Really, Really Want. That's what you got to do. And that's where people are failing. They'll say, oh, it didn't do that thing. Like, well, did you tell it? Did you tell it you didn't like the result? Did you continue the conversation? Oh, you didn't. Okay, well, how is it going to improve then?
Yeah. And so let's talk about building out some of these skills or prompts conceptually. Mm-hmm. What kind of things can they be used for? Like intake, client onboarding, training employees? Like talk to me about some of the cool skills that you see some people in your program using and having a lot of positive experiences with, both in terms of actually working the way they've intended it, but getting them, some significant time savings or accelerating what they're able to do in a given day.
Yeah, so the things that AI is really good at where you have less fear about it doing something catastrophic is like summarization. So the note-taking tools, and I wouldn't try to create your own, like they're out there, like Granola is one I like and use, but there's multiples. Let it take notes, right? Like that's a wonderful thing. Like let it take notes because it's capturing information that you might want to use. Then when you need to go use that information, you can either take the summary that's been generated or get the transcript and feed that into a new tool and ask it to do things with it. So monitoring your intake of knowledge in the form of conversations you're having with people or meetings you're having, that's low stakes but high value. I mean, low risk, high value. From there, we get it, and that's where onboarding would come in. So like, let's say you're onboarding new clients and you're saying, well, what happens in onboarding? Well, they tell you what their problems are. Well, you have to convince them that you're the right lawyer. We have to tell them whatever. There's a bunch of things that happen in an onboarding introductory meeting. So 1, you should be recording those. 2, tell the prospective client you are recording them. Make sure you preserve the confidentiality and don't do things that don't share them with non-lawyers that are not, privileged. Do the obvious things. But then if you take these sessions that are occurring across multiple clients and you ask the AI, hey, listen, here's like 10 sessions. What do you see as the patterns? What are we doing well? What can we improve? That's not necessarily even something you need a skill for, although you can build one and say, here's what I want to know. But it's going to give you insights that are incredible. And So there's just a whole bunch of stuff it can do. It can help you prepare for direct examination or cross-examination. Again, feed it all the stuff for the witnesses and say, hey, I need to set up my questions. Could you do that for me? It'll do it. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to see some of the questions and think of more questions. Great. You're not going to like some of the questions. Fine. Change them. But the amount of BTUs, cognitive BTUs that were expended in creating this are like nothing, right? So you can very quickly get to a place where you're able to do the next important thing if you do. Those would be good examples right there.
So another theme that comes up a lot in your writing, which I really like, is the idea about thinking about AI the wrong way and where people treat it like a search engine or a vending machine, which is funny, or just a general piece of software or something. But what you're saying is that a better model is don't think of it as a tool, but think of it as an associate. Kind of like I was saying before, I was just thinking of this thing as an assistant, just do these basic tasks. But it seems like a simple idea, but it has a ton of implications, right, for how lawyers can communicate and the results they can get from AI. Ernie, what are the similarities between, would you say, managing an associate and then managing your AI tool to act like an associate?
Good question. Well, I think it's giving it direction, giving it good direction, but back to what I said earlier, telling it when it didn't give you what you wanted, and being very explicit about exactly what it was that you wanted and that you didn't get, right? The more detail you give it about what you expect it to do or what the result looks like that you want, the better it can get at doing it. One thing that does happen, so for example, with writing, that's what I do mostly and that's what I care about mostly. So I never thought of trying to describe what I do when I write or what I care about or don't. But as it gives me things, I'll say, I don't like it when you use that word. Like, that word annoys me. I don't use that word. And that's focusing on a word. But then it'll have patterns. And there's the famous one, like, it's not X, it's Y. But there are patterns that it will use or that I will use. And I'll say, oh, I didn't realize that I used that pattern. So you become more aware of the patterns you're using in certain things as you look at them in terms of skills or whatever that it's creating. So just pay attention. I mean, the key is to pay close attention to what's coming out. And I think many of us would rather not. We just rather move on to the next thing. But that's what it takes, right? Like you give feedback. It's a feedback loop.
It's feedback and context, right? You've talked that context is really important, and the idea that you can create context documents. How does that work?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that, because this is where I find it most helpful now, is Claude has this tool called Cowork, which is a desktop app. Mac, PC, doesn't matter. It's on both. And with Cowork, you can aim it at folders. So you can say, I'm going to have these folders, and I know I'm going to want it to work with these folders, and you can switch gears and go, okay, look at this folder, and then let's talk about things we need to do. Well, in the folders is the context, right? The folder is a rag, but you can also put into the folders little instructions. They're markdown files, so they end in the extension .md, and generally the top level one of these instruction sets will be called Claude.md, and in that folder or in that text document will be the instructions and things you want it to do for that particular folder. So it's kind of like a skill, but it's different in that the skill is living wherever it lives and it gets called upon automatically. In this case, it only gets used if you're aiming it at that folder. So those little instructions are one thing. The other thing that you can put in those folders is a memory file, and that would be memory.md. What's in the memory file? It is a memory of what important things were done through the sessions. So instead of it having to look across all the chats and read all that stuff and use up a bunch of tokens and take up a bunch of time to figure it out, it creates its own little trail of breadcrumbs, memory. And when it goes in, it goes, okay, I know what we did. I know that whole history in terms of that context plus the context of the documents. And your job simply is to orchestrate that by letting it create these little files and then managing them.
Yeah, you can see how doing that would make a massive amount of difference because you're giving better input on what you actually want. And again, better input, better output, garbage in, garbage out. Good. I don't know what the converse saying is that. Good in, good out, something like that. Let's talk about the future, Ernie. Do you want to talk about the future?
Sure, why not? You want to talk about aliens?
In terms of running a law firm. But obviously, we talked a lot in this conversation, right, about what lawyers can do today. But again, like the thing I love is you've been on the edge of technology and legal tech specifically for decades now. As we said, you were one of the first people talking about moving to paperless, and then of course cloud computing, AI automation, AI now. But let's look 5 years. And I think that the other thing too, Ernie, is while you've been doing this for decades, like these decades have seen the most insane amount of technological advancement in human history, and it's only compounding, right, as technology keeps evolving. It happens more, faster, et cetera. But 5 years, I mean, and honestly, I feel like it is a millennium away in terms of things happening. But at the same time, law firms, lawyers tend to adopt a lot of technology in a slower, let's say careful or methodic way. So when you look like 5 years into the future and you think about, and again, this goes back to what you're doing with your people in your community, what will be happening inside the best law firms? What will that look like?
Well, if AI is going to keep advancing at a rapid pace, it's going to depend on energy sources. So there's some assumptions there that are foundational. But assuming that everything keeps coming along and evolving, I think what lawyers do is pattern recognition and critical judgment, right? So the pattern recognition part can be handled by AI. The other thing with when you're doing pattern recognition, the next step after some pattern is recognized is, do you act upon it? This is where agentic AI is kicking in, because agentic AI says, oh, there's a trigger, or I sense something happen, which is the trigger. All right, now I'm going to do this because of that thing happening. And then it can branch off, and it can do this in very sophisticated, complex, amazing ways, right? And so all of that heavy lifting of the pattern recognition, the investigation, the research, the fine-tuning of the research, and the site checking the research, all that can be done by AI. What humans are going to be needed for is the judgment. Given all of those circumstances, I think what we need to do is this, and here's why we need to do it. And making the humans you're advising feel comfortable, because they're not going to want to the sophisticated humans are not going to just want to do whatever an AI bot tells them to do for reasons that are not discernible to them. So that people are going to want to know that they're getting good advice from somebody with good judgment. They're also going to want to know that that person is not wasting time and energy gathering all that stuff themselves, and nor wasting money. So lawyers are going to have to change their profit model probably to a large extent. I don't know if the billable hour is going to die instantaneously or quickly, but the only reason why we had that was the best way to estimate or to price the work that was being done. The question is really, what's the value? And people will pay for value. That's what they want to pay for. So lawyers are going to have to adopt a new way of operating, and some will and some won't. And the ones that don't are going to fall behind, and eventually their way of doing things won't be done. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you're describing here, the promise of AI over whatever, 5 years, 20 years, is the same promise as technology going all the way back to like the invention of the wheel. It's just there's a certain part that is going to become a lot more efficient, but then there's human judgment and guidance that still, well, hopefully will remain important. But if you had to, I don't know, pick out a specific role within a firm that's going to become more valuable in these type of AI-enabled firms, what would you say that would be? And when I say role, it doesn't even have to be like a job title, but a specific role that someone may play as just part of their job.
Oh, well, it's going to be what the IT head was, the equivalent of that. It's going to be a person within the firm who knows how to set up and manage the agentic workflows, because that's what's going to be driving a lot of work. And so those are going to have to be done well. The agentic stuff is going to have to be coordinated and supervised in a certain way and updated and all of that. And lawyers with traditional lawyer training are not ready for that. Even IT people aren't really ready for that. So the person doing that job is going to be somebody who's up to their neck in AI, using it all the time and getting a sense of how it works and staying on top of that. They will have earned the trust of the people that hire them to do it, because if they don't have that trust, they're not going to be given rein to do what they need to do. But that's going to be the critical job role. And there'll probably be more than one person doing it, but there's going to be at least one. And maybe there won't be more than one. Maybe one's all you need, because most of the work's going to be done by the AI stuff. But that's going to be the essential ingredient in any kind of knowledge work firm, not just law. Anything where knowledge work is being done, that's going to be critical.
Basically, it sounds just like a systems administrator, like someone who understands how all these systems work and how to implement them in whatever particular business and set of use cases are existing out there. So listen, we've covered a lot today, from like these knowledge management systems, AI-powered chatbots, and skills and prompts and delegation of all that stuff, and the future of running law firm. But just for a law firm owner, leader, attorney listening to this right now, who's like, I want to take some action. What should be the next thing? Maybe they dabble, or like you said, they're treating AI like a search engine or a vending machine. But what's the next step they can take?
So I think the best thing that anybody can do, and I recommended this to you and you've explored it, is a tool like WhisperFlow. Now, it doesn't have to be WhisperFlow, but WhisperFlow is the one that has emerged as the big one. But the idea that you speak words and those words get converted to text, and then you pump it into the AI. Because all these tools have their own little microphone button, but none of them are as good as a tool like WhisperFlow. I'm sure WhisperFlow will have competitors. But here again, I will cite Allie Miller, because I was enthusiastically using WhisperFlow, thinking like, I wonder why she's not recommending it, because she's always on top of these things. And one day she said, WhisperFlow is the game changer. Mark Andreessen, same thing. So WhisperFlow has the endorsement of a lot of people. I was lucky enough to have the founder, Tane Kothari, I think is his last name, come and talk to the Inner Circle people, because I was using it early on. And he said, I'm happy to come talk to your lawyer group. We have a lot of lawyers who are using it. A lot of big law firms, even back then, were using it. So it's a tool that makes a big difference. And if you think about why, it's because you need to get a lot of thoughts out of your head quickly. And it's going to need to either translate audio into text, which was one way. But it's better if you know what text it is interpreting, right? Look at it, make sure names are spelled correctly, what you said is what you need to say. So WhisperFlow, huge game changer. I use it on my phone because I think that's also important. If you can get work done on your phone, that's better. And the thing with AI is doesn't matter how you give it the input. Once you give it, it will go off and do its thing. So I give it a lot of work by logging in, giving it an instruction, telling it to go do something. But I couldn't give it enough context as easily if I couldn't speak. So
just real quick, the idea with WhisperFlow, and the funny thing about it is I had heard about it. I'm checking it out. I'm on the website. I come across, there's a picture of Ernie with a quote on how great it is. So I started texting you about it. I'm like, Look, see this guy? He's everywhere. He's getting that. But the idea there is that instead of typing everything, you're just talking into your mic. And it's cool because obviously it takes what you said, but it fixes it. And you could be like, scratch that last sentence and do this and create this list. And it's really intuitive in a way that like just speaking directly into the ChatGPT voice prompt thing maybe isn't quite as much. But super cool tool. I would check it out. Maybe we'll put a link or something in the bottom. But okay, so that's WhisperFlow. So start there. That's a great just efficiency tool. Anything else that you would say for an attorney, like what they can start doing like this month, or maybe the biggest opportunity that somebody's currently not doing that they can start doing relatively easy?
I mean, we've talked about a lot of these different things, but I think I like to keep them simple and actionable, because if you give people too much stuff, then they don't do any of it. So I really am going to emphasize WhisperFlow, because that enables all the other things to fall into place more readily, right? Like that's an enabler of other things. And, beyond that one, I would just say whatever note-taking tool you like. I mean, there's lots of them now. There's this tool called Claude, which I have like the device here. It fits on the back of your phone, and you push a button, it'll start recording. So it helps you record conversations that you're having in physical space. But I also use it sometimes myself. It's just like I push the button, I walk around, I dictate. It's got 30 hours of recording time, so that's a lot. And I just brain dump ideas into it. And I think that's another area that's really useful. Just getting stuff out of your head. Again, it can be amorphous because the AI will make sense of it. But what tool do you use? You can use your phone. The problem is then you're using up battery life on your phone. And this tool is one that I've noticed a lot of lawyers, they love the hell out of it. They like Whisperflow a lot too, but this Claude device they also really like.
Yeah, it sounds great because what you just said, there's often a lot more friction than we realize getting ideas out of our head, documented somewhere. When I gotta get my phone, I gotta open the app, I gotta find the app, I gotta open the file, and then whereas this, it sounds like you could just record what you're saying, and eventually now it's at least there. It's been memorialized, and then you can find out where you want to put it, and of course use AI to summarize it and make some magic with it. So, Ernie, this has been great, man. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I'm here with Ernie Svenson, Ernie the attorney, as many people know him, but we've been talking about how law firms can use AI to capture institutional knowledge, build better systems, reduce operational bottlenecks, and just ultimately run more efficient practices. And so you can learn more about Ernie and what he's up to at ernietheattorney.net. You can check out his Inner Circle. It's his community for solo and small firm lawyers focused on AI, tech, automation, outsourcing, all things practice management. And as I said earlier, I think it functions almost like an R&D department for small firms where the members can test new stuff, share what's working, and just learn from each other's experiences. Is that a good depiction of what you're doing over there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it is helpful to try these things. Obviously, you should try them. But then the next best part is to go to a place where other people who are like you, other lawyers like you, are trying it and compare notes, right? Like that gives you more confidence. It helps you figure out what to pay attention to more. And so people inside there love that they can talk to other lawyers about their use of AI. And I'm glad, even though I'm not practicing anymore, because I'm learning from them. Because in the end of the day, it's not so much about its use in the practice of law, although of course that's where we want to use it. It's really just how can it work generally? Like it applies across all businesses. The knowledge of how to use it in any kind of business will help you in any other kind of business. But lawyers have other things they have to consider, ethics and confidentiality. And we talk a lot about that. So, yeah, it's a good group.
Yeah, and I think that's great because I think the idea there are training programs. I think that's less important now because you can get a lot of that information in the AI tools. What's more important is the community where you're able to learn and share, ask questions with other people, and have these experiences. And the last thing I would say about Ernie's a great hang, right? Obviously, you've seen that, but he does a really great job of taking complex ideas and making them understandable and simple, as obviously you've been hearing today. So another thing you can do, subscribe to Ernie's newsletter. I do. It's a great quick read from around once or twice a week, and he's writing about all the stuff we've talked about, AI and tech, and just essentially how to build a better law practice. So I'm going to include links to all this stuff that we've been talking about in the show notes. Ernie, before we go, anything else you want to add that we haven't touched on?
No, just go out there and practice safe AI.
Nice, man. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, man, you're always a great hang. I've enjoyed this. And so this is Ernie Svenson, everybody, Ernie the attorney. That's going to be it for today. Lots of great new content and shows coming. So stay tuned, subscribe, check it out. But we'll see you next time. All right, bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.